Imagine this: you wake up one morning to the sound of your mother's voice, calling you for breakfast. The smell of coffee drifts down the hallway, sunlight spills through the curtains, and for a moment, life feels perfectly ordinary. But when you walk into the kitchen, she's not there. In fact, the entire house is empty. No signs of struggle, no broken locks, no footprints, just silence. She's gone. Vanished. And no matter how many people search, no matter how many leads appear, she will never come home again. That is the terrifying reality faced by thousands of families across the world, ordinary mornings that become extraordinary nightmares. Cold cases that stretch on for decades. And today, you're about to step into them. But before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This channel is where chilling mysteries and haunting stories live, so you never miss the next one. The Vanishing of the Springfield 3. June 7th, 1992. It's the morning after high school graduation in Springfield, Missouri. Best friends Susie Streeter and Stacy McCall had just walked across the stage the night before, grinning, hugging, and planning their summer together before heading off to college. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of their young lives. But in less than 12 hours, they, along with Susie's mother, Cheryl Levitt, would become one of the most haunting mysteries in American history. The night of celebration. Susie and Stacy had been bouncing from graduation parties that night. Like most teenagers, they had that restless, electric energy, you know the feeling, when life feels like it's just beginning. They were supposed to crash at a hotel with friends, but somewhere in the shuffle of parties and last-minute changes, they decided instead to spend the night at Susie's house. It seemed safer, quieter. A normal choice. Except that one small, ordinary decision may have sealed their fate. The house that morning. At around 9 a.m., friends began calling the house to check in. No one answered. By noon, people started showing up at the little yellow home on East Delmar Street. Inside, nothing was out of place, except for one haunting detail: all three women's purses were lined up neatly in the living room. Their cars were still in the driveway. It was as though they had stepped out for a moment, and simply never came back. The phone calls. One visitor later recalled something eerie. When she picked up the phone at the house, a man's voice whispered something disturbing before hanging up. That call has never been traced. And whoever he was, if he was connected at all, remains a shadow in the background of this case. The investigation. Police were baffled. There was no forced entry, no signs of a struggle, nothing stolen. It was as though the women had been plucked out of existence. Rumors swirled. Some said it was an abduction by strangers. Others whispered it was someone they knew, someone who walked through the unlocked door in the middle of the night. And then there were darker theories, that the women were buried under a hospital parking garage built shortly after their disappearance. Excavations were requested, tips poured in, but nothing ever came of it. The case went cold, and 30 years later, it remains one of the most unsettling disappearances in U.S. history. If you're already pulled into this mystery, make sure to give this video a like. It tells me you want more haunting stories like this one. Story 2, The Boy in the Box. Now, we travel back in time even further, 1957, Philadelphia. On a cold February afternoon, a man walking along a wooded road stumbled across a cardboard box. He thought it might be trash. But when he lifted the lid, he froze. Inside was the body of a small boy, no more than 4 years old. His hair had been crudely cut, his body covered in bruises, and he was wrapped in a cheap blanket. There were no toys, no notes, no identity. Just a nameless child dumped like garbage. The investigation that went nowhere. The police were desperate to identify him. They took fingerprints, plaster casts of his tiny feet, even photographs of his body dressed in clothes, hoping someone might recognize him. Thousands of flyers were distributed, the boy's picture placed in gas stations and police stations. But no one came forward. Over the years, countless theories emerged. Some believed he was a foster child abused and abandoned. Others thought he had been sold, used, and discarded. The most chilling part? Even after DNA testing decades later, no family connection ever brought closure. This child became known as America's unknown child. His grave still bears those words. The lingering question. Who is he? Why did no one ever claim him? And how does a child vanish so completely from the memory of the world that even death could not bring him justice? To this day, his identity and his killer remain a mystery, one that has haunted detectives for over half a century. If you've made it this far, I want you to pause for just a second. Imagine if this was your child, your sibling, your best friend. These stories aren't just mysteries, they're real people who disappeared without answers. That's why I tell them. And if you want to hear the rest, stay with me, because the next case may be the most disturbing of them all. They never came home. None of their families ever received the answers they desperately needed. And in the world of unsolved mysteries, that's the true horror. Sometimes evil leaves no trace at all. But we're just getting started. Because we'll step into a case so bizarre, so chilling, it feels more like a horror movie than real life. A mystery that has kept investigators awake at night for decades, and one that may change the way you look at strangers forever. Imagine sitting in your own home on a quiet evening. The lights are dim, the television hums in the background, and everything feels calm. Suddenly, without warning, you hear a noise outside. Maybe it's just the wind. Maybe it's a stray animal. But when you go to check, there's nothing. You lock the door, brush it off, and go to bed. By morning, you're gone. This is the nightmare behind one of the strangest and most baffling mysteries of the last century, a case that, even after decades of investigation, remains shrouded in confusion and unanswered questions. Case 1: The Sauter Children Disappearance. Christmas Eve, 1945. Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sauter family home glowed warmly with holiday lights. 9 of the 10 children had gone to bed after opening presents, while George and Jenny Sauter, the parents, were finally ready to sleep after a long evening. But around midnight, something went horribly wrong. The fire. A sudden blaze erupted in the house. Flames swallowed the walls, smoke filled the rooms, and chaos broke out. George and Jenny managed to escape with 4 of their children, but 5 of their kids were still inside. Desperate, George tried to get back in. He grabbed a ladder that was usually propped against the house, but it had vanished. He rushed to his trucks to drive them closer to the house, but neither of the engines would start. It was as if, in the middle of the night, every possible rescue tool had been deliberately disabled. Within minutes, the house burned to the ground. The Sauters mourned their 5 lost children, except, when investigators combed through the ashes, they found nothing. No bodies. No bones. No remains. Theories. How could 5 children vanish in a fire without leaving even a trace? Theories exploded. Some believed the fire was staged, and the children were kidnapped. Others suspected mafia involvement, since George had publicly spoken against Mussolini and the Italian community in the area. Decades later, Jenny Sauter even received a chilling letter with a photograph of a grown man claiming to be one of her missing children. But the truth? No one ever knew. The case remains one of the strangest Christmas mysteries in American history. 5 children, gone without explanation, leaving behind only questions. Backhand index pointing right. If stories like this leave you unsettled yet fascinated, hit the like button right now. It helps the channel, and it tells me to keep bringing you these haunting mysteries. Case 2, The Disappearance of Brandon Swanson. May 14, 2008. Lynn, Minnesota. It was past midnight when 19-year-old Brandon Swanson left a party and began the short drive home. But somewhere along the rural backroads, his car veered into a ditch. Brandon wasn't hurt, but he couldn't get the car out. He called his parents, explaining that he was somewhere between 2 small towns. So his parents got in their car, speaking with him over the phone as they tried to find him. Brandon described landmarks, lights, fences, but every time they thought they were close, he told them he couldn't see them. The last words. At one point, Brandon said he would walk toward the lights of a nearby town. His father stayed on the phone, guiding him, reassuring him. They spoke for nearly 47 minutes. Then suddenly, Brandon exclaimed, "Oh, SHT!" Asterisk, and the line went dead. The search. Police scoured the area. They found his car, exactly where he said it would be. But there were no footprints, no belongings, no trace of Brandon. Dogs tracked his scent to a riverbank but could not follow it across. Some believe he drowned, though no body was ever found. Others suspect foul play, that maybe Brandon stumbled into something or someone he shouldn't have that night. What makes this case so haunting is the immediacy. His parents were right there, on the phone, only minutes away. He wasn't supposed to vanish. But he did. And to this day, Brandon Swanson has never been found. Case 3, the lead masks case. Brazil. August 1966. 2 men were found dead on a hillside just outside Rio de Janeiro. They were lying side by side, dressed in matching suits and raincoats. Each wore a strange lead mask over their eyes, the kind you would use to protect against radiation. Beside them was a notebook. In Portuguese, it read, "Be at the agreed place. Take capsules after the effect. Protect metals. Await signal mask." There were no signs of violence. No struggle. No weapons. Just 2 men, dead in the grass, with cryptic instructions and lead masks. Theories. Investigators pieced together that the men were electronics technicians who had told friends they were conducting an experiment. Some believe they were testing communication with extraterrestrials. Others argue they were tricked into a lethal scam involving toxic capsules. But the strangest part? No one knows what killed them. No poison was ever found in their bodies. The case remains unsolved, an eerie riddle mixing science, superstition, and mystery. Backhand index pointing right before we move forward. If you're listening to this while drifting off to sleep, don't worry, I've got hours of these mysteries lined up for you. Subscribe now so you can always return for more chilling, unexplained stories. Case 4, the vanishing of Bobby Dunbar. August 1912. Opelousas, Louisiana. 4-year-old Bobby Dunbar went missing while on a family fishing trip. Panic erupted as searchers combed the swamp, fearing he had drowned or been taken by alligators. But after 8 agonizing months, Bobby was found in Mississippi, alive, with a man who claimed to be caring for him. The boy was returned to the Dunbars, who wept with relief. Case closed. Or so it seemed. The dispute. Shortly after, a woman came forward, insisting the boy was her son, Bruce Anderson. She claimed the man who had him was a family friend. A custody battle erupted, but in the end, the court sided with the Dunbars. The boy grew up as Bobby Dunbar. For decades, the case was considered solved, until the 2000s, when DNA testing revealed the shocking truth: the boy raised as Bobby Dunbar was not related to the Dunbar family at all. So what happened to the real Bobby Dunbar? Did he drown that day? Was he taken by someone else? Over 100 years later, the original Bobby's fate remains one of the great unsolved mysteries in American history. The Sodder children, the boy who cried OSH*T before disappearing, 2 men in Brazil with lead masks, and a child who may have been replaced altogether. Each story is its own puzzle, its own haunting reminder that sometimes the truth isn't just missing, it's hidden, buried, and locked away in silence. But we're not done. Because coming next, we'll dive into mysteries that take us even deeper, cases where entire communities were shaken, where evidence pointed everywhere and nowhere all at once, and where to this day, the answers still slip through our fingers. Backhand index pointing right, stay with me. And before we move forward, remember, subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll never miss these mysteries. There's always another story waiting. Picture this: you're standing in a crowded place, maybe a shopping mall, a bus station, or an airport. People are moving in every direction, voices blur together, and for a moment, you feel like you're invisible in the chaos. But then, suddenly, someone you love, your child, your spouse, your best friend, who was just standing beside you, is gone. No scream. No struggle. No trace. Just gone. this is the cruel reality of many unsolved disappearances. And tonight, in Act 3, we step into some of the most unsettling mysteries where people vanished in plain sight, leaving nothing but questions. Case 1, the disappearance of Maura Murray. February 9, 2004. It was a cold night in Haverhill, New Hampshire, when 21-year-old nursing student Maura Murray crashed her car into a snowbank on a rural road. A passing school bus driver stopped to check on her. Maura assured him she was fine and declined his offer to call the police. He drove away. Minutes later, when police arrived, Maura was gone. The mystery. Her car was still there, locked, with airbags deployed. Inside were her belongings, including wine and alcohol. There were no footprints in the snow leading away. No cell phone signal. No signs of a struggle. She had simply vanished. Theories. Theories range wildly. Some say she staged her disappearance to start a new life. Others believe she was abducted in that short window of time before authorities arrived. Some speculate foul play involving someone she knew, or even the bus driver who last saw her. Nearly 2 decades later, Maura Murray's disappearance remains one of the internet's most dissected mysteries, with entire communities devoted to solving it. But still, no answers. Case 2, the Yuba County Five. February 1978. 5 men from Yuba City, California, set out to watch a basketball game. They never came home. Their car was later found abandoned on a remote mountain road, far from their intended route. The keys were gone, but the vehicle itself was in working order. It hadn't broken down. So why was it left there? The discovery. Months later, hikers stumbled upon a deserted forestry trailer deep in the wilderness. Inside, they found the emaciated body of one of the men, lying in a bed, wrapped in sheets, surrounded by food and supplies. The chilling part? There had been enough rations to last all 5 men for weeks, yet the others were nowhere to be seen. Over time, more remains were discovered in the area. But the circumstances never added up. Why had they driven so far into the wilderness? Why hadn't they used the food and heat in the trailer? And what happened in those freezing mountains that caused 5 healthy young men to lose their way, forever? Backhand index pointing right if you're still listening, and these stories have you on the edge of your seat. Make sure to tap the like button. It's a huge help in bringing more of these unsolved mysteries to the channel. Case 3, the Flannan Isles Mystery. December 1900. On the remote Flannan Isles off the coast of Scotland stood a lonely lighthouse. 3 keepers were stationed there, James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. When a relief vessel arrived after a storm, the lighthouse stood eerily quiet. The door was locked, the lamp was unlit, and the keepers were nowhere to be found. The scene inside. Inside the quarters, everything seemed in order. Meals were half-eaten. A chair was overturned. But the men's heavy weather gear, their coats, were missing. It was as though they had stepped outside into the storm and never returned. The theories. Explanations vary. A massive rogue wave sweeping them into the sea. A fight between the men turning violent. Or something stranger, superstitions about the island being haunted, cursed, or even visited by forces beyond comprehension. To this day, the 3 lighthouse keepers remain missing, swallowed by wind, water, or something much darker. Case 4, the disappearance of Louis Le Prince. Before Thomas Edison, before the Lumiere brothers, there was Louis Le Prince, the true father of motion pictures. In 1890, Le Prince boarded a train in Dijon, France. He was expected to arrive in Paris to unveil his invention to the world. But when the train reached the station, Le Prince was nowhere to be found. His luggage? Gone. His body? Never recovered. Why it matters? Le Prince had created the first moving images using a single-lens camera. His disappearance not only robbed his family of answers but also left history altered. Edison would go on to claim fame as the pioneer of film, while Le Prince slipped into obscurity, erased by mystery. Was he murdered for his invention? Did he take his own life? Or was it corporate sabotage? We'll never know. Backhand index pointing right. If you're new here and stories like this are pulling you deeper, don't forget to subscribe. There are still hours of mysteries ahead, and trust me, they only get stranger from here. Case 5, The Strange Death of Elisa Lam. January 2013. The Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles has a dark history: suicides, murders, and disappearances. But none are more famous than the case of Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old student from Canada. She vanished during her stay at the hotel. Weeks later, guests complained of low water pressure and a foul taste. Maintenance staff checked the rooftop water tanks. Inside one of them was Elisa's body. The elevator video. Before her disappearance, CCTV footage captured Elisa in an elevator, behaving erratically, pressing buttons repeatedly, peeking into the hallway, hiding in the corner, and gesturing as though speaking to someone invisible. Theories exploded online. Some said she was murdered. Others believed she suffered a mental health episode. And conspiracy theorists whispered about the hotel's cursed history, even linking it to the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez, who once lived there. The case was officially ruled accidental drowning. But how Elisa Lam ended up in a sealed rooftop water tank, with locked doors and alarms in place, remains one of the most unsettling mysteries of the 21st century. A nursing student vanishes from a snowy road. 5 friends disappear into the wilderness. 3 lighthouse keepers never come home. A pioneer of film erased from history. A young woman found in a water tank. All of them share one thing: no resolution. No closure. Just shadows where answers should be. But as disturbing as these stories are, the next line takes us even deeper, into mysteries that blur the line between crime, conspiracy, and the unexplainable. Cases where the evidence is so bizarre it defies logic, and where every clue seems to make the truth more impossible to see. Backhand index pointing right. Stay tuned. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe now so you'll never miss the next chapter of these chilling, unsolved mysteries. Imagine finding a trail of footprints in fresh snow. They start at the edge of a forest, clear and defined, but after a few steps, they just stop. No return tracks, no disturbance, no explanation. That image, ordinary steps ending in nothing, is the essence. We explore cases where people and entire groups disappeared into thin air, leaving behind evidence that only deepens the mystery. Case 1, the Dyatlov Pass Incident. January 1959. Ural Mountains, Soviet Union. 9 experienced hikers set out on a winter expedition. They never returned. Weeks later, rescuers discovered their campsite, and what they saw has haunted investigators for over 60 years. The campsite. The hiker's tent was found slashed open from the inside. Their belongings, boots, jackets, gear, were left behind. Yet the hikers had fled barefoot into the snow, in sub-zero temperatures. Their bodies were found scattered across the mountainside. Some died of hypothermia, but others bore injuries that defied explanation: crushed ribs, fractured skulls, even missing eyes and tongue. No signs of external trauma, just massive internal damage, as though hit by an impossible force. The theories. Theories range from avalanche to military testing, from secret weapons to UFO encounters. Some point to radiation detected on their clothes. Others believe panic drove them into the wilderness. But nothing explains the combination of bizarre injuries, the state of the tent, and why 9 trained hikers ran into certain death. The Dyatlov Pass Incident remains one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in the world. Case 2, the disappearance of Flight MH370. March 8, 2014. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur with 239 people on board. Hours into the flight, it vanished from radar. No distress call, no communication. Just silence. The search. For weeks, the world watched as one of the largest search operations in history scoured the Indian Ocean. Debris eventually washed ashore in Africa and nearby islands, but the wreckage of the plane, and the truth about what happened, has never been found. The theories. Some believe it was pilot suicide. Others suggest hijacking. conspiracy theorists claim military involvement or deliberate cover-ups. But after years of investigation, the disappearance of MH370 remains aviation's greatest mystery, a modern ghost ship that slipped into nothingness, leaving families with no closure. Backhand index pointing right. If this story already feels heavy, take a second to hit the like button. It not only helps the channel, it keeps these stories alive, so the people behind them are never forgotten. Case 3, the Villisca Axe Murders. June 10, 1912. Villisca, Iowa. The Moore family lived a quiet life in their small town. That night, 8 people slept under their roof, 2 parents, 4 children, and 2 visiting friends. By morning, every single one of them was dead. The crime scene. They had been brutally murdered with an axe, their faces covered with sheets. Doors were locked from the inside. Neighbors only discovered the massacre when the house remained eerily silent the next day. The investigation. Dozens of suspects were questioned, neighbors, drifters, even a state senator. But every lead collapsed. Some say it was a traveling killer, possibly linked to similar axe murders across the Midwest. Others whisper that the killers still lived in Villisca, blending back into the community after wiping out an entire family. To this day, the Villisca axe murders remain unsolved, a chilling reminder that sometimes evil hides in plain sight. Case 4, the disappearance of the Beaumont children. January 26, 1966. Adelaide, Australia. On a bright summer morning, Jane, 9, Arna, 7, and Grant, 4, Beaumont went to the beach to swim and play. By afternoon, when they didn't return, their mother began to panic. Witnesses reported seeing the children laughing with a tall, blond man. But after that, they were never seen again. The aftermath. The disappearance shattered the sense of safety in Australia. Parents who once let their children roam freely now kept them close. The case became one of the largest manhunts in Australian history, yet no trace of the Beaumonts was ever found. Theories. Some suspect they were taken by a predator who stalked them. Others suggest a kidnapping ring. Over the years, confessions, false leads, and suspects have surfaced, but nothing definitive. Nearly 60 years later, the Beaumont children remain missing, their case etched into Australia's collective memory as the crime that changed the nation. Case 5, the Hinterkaifeck Murders. Germany, 1922. On a remote farmstead, the Gruber family lived in uneasy isolation. In the days before their deaths, neighbors reported strange occurrences, footsteps in the snow leading to the house, but none leaving. Keys went missing. The family heard noises in the attic. Then, one night, someone murdered all 6 inhabitants, including children and a baby, using a mattock, a heavy farming tool. The disturbing detail. The killer stayed in the house for days afterward, feeding the livestock, cooking meals, and making himself at home, while the bodies lay in the barn and bedrooms. The investigation. Despite multiple suspects, including family members, neighbors, and drifters, the case was never solved. The image of footprints in snow leading only in remains one of the most chilling mysteries in criminal history. A group of hikers torn apart by unseen forces. A plane vanishing from the sky. Families wiped out in their homes. Children disappearing in broad daylight. Footsteps leading into a house, but never out. Each case is like a riddle with missing pieces, where every theory leads to another dead end. This takes us to the darkest edge of all, the mysteries where horror and tragedy merge, where we are forced to question not just what happened, but whether the answers were ever meant to be found. Backhand index pointing right. Stay with me for the final act. And if you haven't yet, subscribe now, because there are always more mysteries waiting, and you don't want to miss them. Think about the people closest to you, family, friends, the ones you trust the most. Now imagine one night they vanish. No note, no goodbye, no clue. Days stretch into years. Hope withers into silence. And eventually, you're left asking, did I ever really know what happened? Or am I chasing ghosts? That feeling, emptiness wrapped in unanswered questions, is what defines the cases in this final act. Case 1, The disappearance of Brian Shaffer. April 1st, 2006. Columbus, Ohio. Brian Shaffer, a medical student, went out with friends to celebrate the start of spring break. They bar hopped, laughed, and eventually ended up at the Ugly Tuna Saloon, a bar on the second floor of a small building. Security cameras captured Brian walking into the bar with his friends. But when the bar closed, and the crowd spilled onto the streets, Brian was gone. The footage. The most haunting detail, cameras recorded everyone entering and leaving the bar that night. Except Brian. He walked in. But he was never filmed leaving. There were no back exits open to the public, no secret passageways. He simply vanished inside a building filled with people. The theories. Some believe he was murdered and smuggled out, but how could that happen under camera surveillance? Others suggest he left disguised, blending into the crowd. His father clung to hope for years, only to die in a tragic accident in 2008, never knowing what happened to his son. Brian Shaffer's disappearance remains one of the most baffling cases in modern history, a man who walked into a bar and was never seen again. Case 2, the Long Island serial killer, Lisk. December 2010. Police searching for a missing woman near Gilgo Beach on Long Island made a grisly discovery: human remains. Over the next months, they uncovered the bodies of 10 people, mostly women linked to the sex trade, scattered along the beach. The shadow of a killer. The Long Island serial killer was quickly suspected. Yet despite intensive investigations, endless theories, and mounting public pressure, no one was ever charged for the majority of the murders for over a decade. Some believe the killer was a police officer or someone with insider knowledge, given how carefully the victims were disposed of. Others think there may have been more than one killer at work. For years, the case remained cold, a reminder that even in modern America, a serial killer could operate in the shadows, taking lives and leaving families with only questions. Case 3, the mystery of Natalie Holloway. May 30th, 2005. Aruba. 18-year-old Natalie Holloway was on a senior trip with her classmates. On her last night, she was seen leaving a bar with a young man named Joran van der Sloot. She never returned. The investigation. Search parties scoured the island. Authorities interrogated suspects. But Natalie's body was never found. Despite international headlines and countless theories, her disappearance remains unresolved. Years later, van der Sloot was linked to another murder in Peru, confirming that he was dangerous. But even then, he never confessed to what happened to Natalie. For her family, the island trip meant to celebrate her future instead became a lifelong nightmare. Backhand index pointing right. If you've stayed with me this long, I know these stories are pulling at you. They matter. Every unsolved mystery is someone's real life, frozen in silence. Case 4, the Hall Mills Murders. New Jersey, 1922. The bodies of Edward Hall, a pastor, and Eleanor Mills, a choir singer, were discovered under a tree. Both were married to other people, and their affair had been the subject of whispers. Their bodies told a story of rage. Hall had been shot in the head. Mills's throat had been slashed so violently she was nearly decapitated. The scandal. Newspapers exploded with coverage. The case had everything: sex, lies, jealousy, and murder. Many suspected Hall's wife and her brothers, but despite 2 sensational trials, no one was ever convicted. The murders remain unsolved, a century-old reminder that passion and betrayal can end in blood, and yet, justice can still slip away. Case 5, the Silent Twins. Not all mysteries end in death. Some remain in life, stranger than fiction. June and Jennifer Gibbons, known as the Silent Twins, grew up in Wales. From childhood, they refused to speak to anyone but each other. They created their own private language, shut out the world, and even mirrored each other's movements. As they grew older, their bond grew darker. They committed crimes together, were institutionalized, and baffled doctors. Then one day, Jennifer suddenly died of unexplained causes at age 29. June later told interviewers that Jennifer had said, It's time for me to die so you can live. Even today, no medical explanation has ever been found for Jennifer's death. The silent twins remain one of the most haunting psychological mysteries in modern history. Brian Shaffer vanishing inside a bar. The shadow of a serial killer haunting Long Island. A young woman disappearing on an island trip. A double murder drenched in scandal. Twins who lived in silence, bound by something we may never understand. Unsolved mysteries aren't just stories, they're scars on families, questions without answers, wounds that time cannot heal. They force us to face the truth. Sometimes evil wins. Sometimes the world simply refuses to reveal its secrets. But even in silence, these stories endure, because telling them is the only way to keep the memory alive. If this marathon kept you hooked, if you felt the weight of these mysteries the way I do, subscribe right now. Because there are always more stories waiting, haunting, tragic, and unforgettable. And here, we will always tell them.